What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Sports 360. I'm Jeff Fennell, and I'm here with my man, Rob Duran of Rob Duran Sports. Rob, what's up?
Hey, Jeff, how's it going, man?
Things are going well. Man. I tell you, this time of the year, I'm really, I get excited this time of the year as the weather starts to change. And you can see spring in front of you. This is the time of year that I really enjoy. But also too, it lets you know we got March Madness coming. Before that we got the tournaments, but we got March Madness. We got NBA playoffs. We're gonna have the Masters coming up soon, right? Typically, and this is a sore point for you, Rob,
Oh,
we'd have
boy.
baseball, but right now there's no baseball, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, man, this time of the year, I really enjoy it for all those reasons and more.
Yeah, it's a great time to be a sports fan. And like you said, around this time, I'm starting to make my Yankees to the World Series predictions, and I'm trying to build a case for that. But I can't do it right now, man. I just can't.
Nope. You and a lot of other baseball fans right now are on ice, waiting to see if the deadlock between Major League Baseball and the union is going to break. We talked last week about the negotiations breaking down, and Rob Manfred, Commissioner Manfred, uh, canceling the first two series of the season, and negotiations resumed yesterday, which was Sunday, as we're speaking here today, and the reports weren't favorable, and it may be that the commissioner is going to come out in the next day or so and perhaps cancel some more games.
Yeah, and that's just going to be more sadness in my heart, man.
Yeah, and you won't be alone. Um, but so that is kind of a soft spot or a black cloud on the sports horizon. Um, but again, this is a time of year where a lot is going on, and hopefully baseball will get it together, and we'll be back to playing baseball as well. But seems like there's a lot of work to do there. um Rob, another story though that has come out today on Monday as we're speaking, comes out of the NFL, where the NFL has suspended Calvin Ridley, wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. It's an indefinite suspension that will cover at least the 2022 season, may go beyond that, because he bet on NFL games. NFL has a policy that you cannot bet. NFL personnel, including players, you can't bet on sporting events. And Calvin Ridley was found to have bet on games, and he's been suspended for at least a year. Um, any initial thoughts from you, Rob, when you saw that story coming out of the NFL?
Um, it was almost like a shock factor, just because you don't typically see news like this come out, and for it to be a receiver that just yesterday, maybe a couple days ago, a player that was being talked about as one of the guys that a lot of teams are going to pursue, you know, Patriots, the Jets, all these other teams looking for a wide receiver, and he was the name that just kept coming up, and now all of a sudden his season is gone, and who knows what? Like you said, the statement says at least through the 2022 season. So who knows how long this suspension will actually last, and what happens after this season. But my first reaction was, wow, that's some big news, considering what the NFL has in place in terms of betting on the game or players betting and stuff like that. So obviously this is just the beginning of this story. We don't know what's going to happen throughout, but it's big stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's a very big story, and and for me, it's a story that has a lot of layers to it.
Yes.
First of all, look, I, I don't. We need to have a rule. Every league needs to have a rule that prohibits players and other personnel. So coaches, assistant coaches, trainers, front office personnel. Right? If you're associated with the league, as an employee, including being a player, then yeah, there needs to be a prohibition on betting on sports, especially betting on your own sport. As Roger Goodell said in his statement, that goes to the heart of the integrity of the games that we're watching. So I have no problem, Rob, with the rule. I don't. I mean, I think we need to have that rule in place.
I
Um,
agree.
but we also know, Rob, that athletes are human beings, and athletes are going to engage in the types of activities that the majority of us engage in. And we know there's been some very high profile athletes. Now, we can go back to Shoeless Joe Jackson and and the Black Sox scandal. We can go back to Pete Rose, who's been banned from baseball. But we also have some athletes who did not get in trouble necessarily, but who are notorious as gamblers. Michael Jordan,
Yep.
Charles Barkley, Antoine Walker, just to name a few. So we know there are plenty of athletes who enjoy the wager. Yeah, we can have the rule that prohibits athletes and others involved in the delivery of sport from betting on sports. But Rob, man, it's having that rule is not like the be all end all in a
Yeah,
situation like this.
and I think that kind of stuff is going to actually, maybe with this situation, come to light a little bit more, and maybe it'll prompt leagues, starting with the NFL, who's, this is their story, to kind of revisit not just the rule, because I do agree. I think the rule is, it has to be in place. It has to, like, there's no condoning what Calvin Ridley did here. There's none of that. But I think, yeah, maybe they will revisit their rule and implement some other stuff to kind of make sure that this stuff does not happen again. Like, under no circumstances ever happens again. And unfortunately for Ridley, yeah, he made a dumb decision in doing what he did and betting. And he said he only bet $1,500, which to a guy making the money he makes, that's nothing. But you still did it. So yeah, you have to get punished for it. You have to suffer the consequences of your actions. But I think this is an opportunity for the NFL to kind of look at their rules and say, all right, how can we make sure that this never happens again? Because it doesn't happen often, at least publicly. We don't know if it happens behind the scenes. We may never find out if it happens behind the scenes. But publicly, the NFL has to do something here to make sure that this kind of news never breaks again.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point about, you say, hey, they may need to implement something. And for me, I take that to mean, at least what I think about is whether you're the NFL, MLB, or any of these other leagues, is it enough to simply have a rule to say to your personnel? Let's just talk about athletes. We know it applies to other personnel, but to say to your players, don't bet on the games. And if you do, the hammer's going to come down. Is that enough when we're living in a world where sports gambling is now legal and all of these leagues are in partnerships with multiple sports books and others who are involved in the sports gambling business? Is it enough for the NFL simply to say to the Calvin Ridleys of the world, you better not bet on games? Or
Mm.
should they have support mechanisms that are real support mechanisms, right? To help the athletes not bet on games, right? And I'm not talking about having a program or two in place so that you can have some window dressing and say, hey, we have a program. No, do you really have something in place to help these athletes deal with the legalization of sports betting and how it has saturated the sports landscape.
Yeah, and I think that would be important, just because, like you said, a rule is a rule, and you can read it, you can choose to ignore it, you can just read it and say, "Yeah, I'll follow. I'm not going to do it." But there's also, a lot of legal stuff behind the reasoning for that rule, especially with betting. So I think having some type of, like you said, so maybe some type of program where players can sit down, even if it's, on guys on draft days, rookies coming in, kind of have that program in place saying, this is why we can't have you bet. This is, just explaining the behind the scenes stuff as well. Because it's one thing to say, don't do it, and then hope they don't do it. But it's another thing to really break it down for them, and almost, and I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but almost dumb it down for them to understand why this rule is in place, what the consequences are, and basically just kind of have them understand that part of it. And I think that's important, just really breaking it down for the athlete so that they know not to get engaged with any sort of, betting or gambling when it comes to the sport.
Yeah, I know that, for example, in baseball, um, that they have a rookie career symposium, and it's multi days, and so many different things are presented to young players. Things about how to handle your money, how to handle the media, and performance enhancing drugs and sports gambling, domestic violence, you name it, right? An introduction to all of the things, the good, the bad, the ugly, the things you should do, the things you shouldn't do, and so forth, and the resources that are available for you to successfully navigate it all. So they do have those things. And, at various points of the season, especially in spring training, there may be reminders, right, of the domestic violence policy, of the PED policy, of, the gambling policy. And I would imagine other leagues do the same thing, which is great. To me, I think, as we continue to go down this road, I think leagues have to continually examine what types of mechanisms they have in place to help players. Because, see, for me, if the leagues are going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars from sports betting, they can't simply say to their personnel, "But you can't bet." No. With the opportunity to profit off of sports betting, in my mind, comes the responsibility to not only just prohibit your personnel from gambling on sports, but to help them to not gamble on sports.
Yeah, and that's the big one right there. And you hit it perfectly.
We'll see, man. Because, see, here's the thing: Commissioner Goodell, as we all know, NFL commissioner, has incredible authority under the collective bargaining agreement and the related rules. And the policy actually says that for violations, they'll be looked upon on a case by case basis. So, it's not like baseball where it says, okay, you bet on baseball, you're banned for life. In the NFL, it's a case by case determination. And the penalties could be fines, it could be suspensions, it could be termination of employment, it could be banishment from the NFL. And what's notable about the NFL statement, and we talked about it, is that it says that Ridley is suspended indefinitely and at least through the 2022 season. He may get more,
Yeah.
right? The NFL is going to investigate, and he may be subject to more. He's 27 years old. That's the other thing. He's 27 years old, talented, as you just mentioned, his name popping up in all of these scenarios going to other teams, right? So, obviously, a talented NFL player comes out of the University of Alabama, right? The football factory of America,
Mhm.
right? And, you know, what are we going to do? Throw him on a
Yeah.
trash heap because he bet $1,500 on the game? Again, not condoning it, but, the story hasn't been fully told yet about what his punishment ultimately is going to be. But I will tell you this: if they try to Pete Rose him, I
Oh
think there should
boy,
be an outcry, from the NFLPA. I'm sure they're going to fight tooth and nail for him if that happens, and rightly so, because yes, he shouldn't be betting, but again, right now the lines are murky, man, because these leagues are making so much money. These sports books and other sports and betting entities are viewed as partners of the league. You know what I'm saying? And I just think that carries some responsibility for the league to do more than just be disciplinarian. I do. So let's see what happens with them. But if they try to Pete Rose this guy, Ridley, I think there should be an upcry from many corners.
I definitely agree there, and I hope that there is because I mean maybe I'm in the minority of saying this, but maybe the year, and I don't know, what, like you said, MLB has a lifetime ban for Pete Rose, for doing what he did, but I thought a year long suspension that was kind of harsh, and like you said, it's not. We don't know if it's just a year. This could be 2 years. It could be 3 years. Next thing you know, this guy, Calvin Ridley's 30 years old and on the wrong side of
Hmm.
making making an NFL roster.
Right. Right. So um, and Rob, it's so easy to bet these days.
Yeah,
And you and I were talking about it offline. You cannot watch television, and you certainly cannot watch a game without being inundated with commercials on sports betting. It's all over the place. It's in your face. And
everywhere, social
then,
media, everything.
yeah, the sponsorship banners that are in the stadiums, right? You know, can be from, DraftKings or, some of these other sports betting related entities. So it is saturating the games. And um, when I look at that, I just think that, yeah, we have to have, a disciplinary regime in for sports personnel, everybody associated with the game, from players, referees, coaches, throughout. But at the same time, we got to have support mechanisms there too. Because I would hate to see these leagues just making money and then ending, players and other careers because someone runs afoul of the rule. It just can't be that, Rob. It just can't be.
Definitely not, man. And hopefully, we'll see. Like this is still an open book, so we'll see. And not to kind of sidetrack from this, but I hope that the league investigates the way they're investigating this and diving deep. They continue to investigate the Dolphins owner for the accusations made by Brian Flores too. So I hope because where he's asking Flores to tank games, and I know it's not so much gambling, but you're still asking the outcome of a game to change for your benefit. So I hope that
Yeah.
the league definitely jumps into that, full force as well, and we see something come out of that.
Yeah. Look, I think that's a good point, right? Because whether you're betting on games or tanking games, the one thing that both of those have in common is that they speak to the integrity of the game.
Hmm.
And if you're the NFL, you can't look to protect the integrity of the game in the Ridley situation more than you do so in the Ross situation,
Yeah,
right? The Stephen Ross situation. So, yeah, you're right. Um, Totally different subjects, but both of them speak to the integrity of the game. Um, and so, yeah, I do hope, and always have, that they will, thoroughly investigate the Flores allegations. Um, but on the Ridley scenario, it's the economic component and how the NFL, and this is not just an NFL problem, but how the NFL and these leagues are benefiting from the um, commercial relationships that they have with these betting entities, that to me makes this a very layered issue. And so let's see where it goes. But obviously have to keep an eye on it. And it's going to be one of those things where, right, we don't know when or if subsequent discipline is going to come down, right? And it could be one of those things that tries to sneak its way through the headlines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, we got to keep our eye on this one for sure. Um, Speaking of sneaking its way through the headlines, Brittney Griner, right? WNBA star, former, standout at Baylor, right? Um, Arrested in Russia, right, for what she had a vape, right,
Yeah.
and cannabis oil and all the rest of it, and she was arrested at the airport, and she's in detention right now. She's being detained in Russia, and the story just came out over the past few days. But as you mentioned when you and I were talking about this, she was arrested over 3 weeks ago, and somehow, the story and the information just really started to come out in the last few days, and so you're talking about something being kept out of the headlines and getting a lot of attention. What's going on with Brittney Griner, being detained in Russia certainly is one of those, and it's startling to know that that could happen to a person and an athlete of her stature.
Yeah. And my first thought with that, when I found out it had been 3 weeks before the story got out, that was some scary stuff, man. Because, like you said, she's a well-known athlete. Like, people know who she is. They've known her. We know her since college, like you mentioned, standout star in college, in the WNBA, and for nobody to have known for 3 weeks, at least not publicly, where she was and that she was detained in Russia, of all places, considering what's going on in the world today. That's some scary stuff, man.
Sure it is, and it makes you, wonder, and think about what happens to the no name, so-called no name people, right, who are caught up in custody. But and this happens all the time, right? And so this is not something that's new, but in Brittany Griner's case, as you just mentioned, probably one of the worst places right now to be detained in a situation like this, given what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and the sort of global backlash against Russia in so many ways. And, the United States is working, as you would imagine, to get Brittany Griner home. But what's going on in Ukraine certainly is complicating things, you would have to think. And so it's concerning. It would always be concerning, Rob, in a situation like this, but it's especially concerning now given what's going on in the Ukraine.
Yeah, and we just hope that she's able to get back home. And I know, the countries are doing what they have to do behind the scenes and to kind of help this outcome, but hopefully she's able to make it back safely, um, and kind of put this behind her. But it's scary stuff, man.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, I mean, she was playing overseas, right? She's played
Yeah,
in Russia before. She's played in the region before. And it also highlights, sort of what is the situation for a lot of WNBA players. During their so-called off season, they're playing elsewhere.
yeah,
They're playing in other parts of the world. And, you know, the that brings up a whole host of concerns and always has been there, right? The wear and tear on their bodies, how this affects their personal life. I mean, we saw Brianna Stewart, right, in an international game, you know, have an Achilles injury, right?
yeah,
That sidelined her for a good while. But just the wear and tear because you don't have the time to rest and recuperate in your what should be your off season. but again, because of the economics of the league, and look, there were some economic gains made by players in their last CBA, but they're still not making the type of money that NBA players are making, and therefore they have to go and supplement their WNBA salaries by playing overseas. So that just sort of brings up another point. She wasn't over there. Like someone would say, well, why would she go to Russia given what's going on in the world? She was going
Yeah,
over there to play. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, which is like you said, a whole different issue. I would say definitely an issue with the amount of money WNBA players are making here. The fact that they have
Right.
to take their off season to make more money than they make in the WNBA, that's a whole problem and issue in itself.
Right. Right. So everybody, I'm sure, is hoping for the safe return home for Brittney Griner. And again, this is not to overlook other American citizens who may also be in detention, right? But we just live in that kind of a world, right? If you're a star or you're a name, it's going to be news. But
Yeah.
anybody who's detained, we want them to be home. It's just that obviously we know a Brittney Griner situation because of her celebrity. Um, on the NBA front, Rob, this past weekend, man, we saw some really outstanding performances. LeBron James dropping 56, Tatum dropping 54, Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. And then Nikola Jokic dropping a 46-point triple double on folk. I mean, some of these NBA players, man, are doing some phenomenal things. What's your take on some of and we're not even talking John Morant, who
Joe.
is like,
Oof.
look, listen, you know how they used to call Harold Miner Baby Jordan, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was the worst thing that could have happened to Harold Miner, by the way, to be called Baby Jordan. But I will tell you this. John Morant is baby Dominique Wilkins. If Dominique
Mm,
Wilkins is the human highlight, right? Human highlight film,
yeah.
John Morant got to be like baby Dominique because that guy, it seems like every week he does something that's jaw dropping, man. But what do you think about the NBA play, man? Some of these things that we've been seeing, some of these phenomenal performances.
It's been insane. First of all, I wish John Morant would have been in the slam dunk contest because then we would have seen a show by him alone. And I think they should. I know Obi Toppin won it, but they should slide that trophy right over to John Morant based on the kind of dunks we saw from him right after the All Star break. Because my goodness, man, the dude is just special. And that's a great comparison because I've always compared him to Derrick Rose if Derrick Rose hadn't gotten hurt, but that's a good comparison there. But the kind of stuff we've seen in the NBA, LeBron dropping, was it 56? Insane, man. The guy's 37 years old, and he is playing out of his mind for a team that needs it, obviously. But the dude is averaging almost 30 points a game and just absolute beast. Like you were expecting LeBron James to make the playoffs and carry the team in there, but he's 37 and he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. But there he goes. And then Jason Tatum, the kind of run that the Celtics have been on lately, and I think they're like 8-2 in their last 10 games. They had a 9-game winning streak going prior to the All Star break, and I think through it. But the Celtics are playing great ball, and it's being led by Jason Tatum, who had an absolute showing of a game against the Nets. And the dude is special, man. He is a different type of player, and I think he's continuing to ascend. I think he's like 24 years old. So he's continuing to ascend into what I believe will be one of the best players in the NBA, very shortly. Because he's long, he's athletic, he can guard 1 through 5, and he can score with the best of them. And as long as he continues to grow and become more consistent of a scorer, there is no limit for the kind of talent he has. And then, speaking of no limit, the Joker is I joke around a lot with him because he's the most unathletic basketball player I've ever seen in my life. But the dude is a straight baller. He scored 30 points in fourth quarter and overtime. He had 46 for the game, a triple double. Like, what can't this guy do? He's a great passer as a center. Great passer. His core vision is like point guard esque, and just his ability to score from anywhere. You just He's a big body dude that you just can't stop in the post. You can't stop him in the wing. You can't stop him at the 3-point line. You just can't. He's just a phenomenal player, and the NBA is in really good hands. They have a lot of great stars, and it was great to see all this stuff happen really back to back to back.
Yeah, I mean, the performances as you just outlined are fantastic. A couple of things I like or one thing I want to focus on of the three that you mentioned, I want to focus on Jason Tatum because, you know, the Boston Celtics right now, I believe they've won 16 out of their last 18. That's how hot they've been.
Wow.
And they're rising in the East and they're rising in the power rankings. I think in the latest power rankings that have come out, they have ascended to third. But you and I both know the season didn't start out that way. I
Yeah.
mean, they were struggling. They have a new coach in Adoka, and the season did not start out very well. And in fact, there were a lot of people who were writing and going on podcasts and elsewhere saying that you had to break up Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum, that the two of them could not play together. We heard a lot of that early in the season. You know what? We're not hearing any of that right now, are we? Right?
Nope.
This is why sports talk, it's it's too instant, right? It's like we have to make instant analyses on things that sometimes you have to let it play out. You know what I mean? And I think we heard a whole lot of stuff about Jason Tatum, his shot selection. He doesn't know how to pass the ball. Remember when Marcus Smart made his comment and people were running with that about, oh, Tatum needs to learn how to pass. Have you heard anybody talking about Tatum needs to learn how to pass now?
Nope.
No, they're not saying anything, right? And so I look at Tatum and look, I've liked that young man ever since he was in Duke. He's come out and he's just been phenomenal. So that 54 points that he scored the other day, his fourth 50-point game in the regular season. He also has two in the playoffs, I think. And that ties him for Larry Bird for the most 50-point games in Celtics franchise history. And this guy is 24 years old. Now, I'm going to back up because whether it's Jason Tatum and even LeBron James, the Joker, John Morant, all the rest of them, I'm going to back up and I'm going to say it's phenomenal what they're doing in today's game. But today's game is all about shooting. Don't tell me like they talking about who plays defense. I'll tell you who plays defense in the NBA. Nobody. Okay. I mean, we had a regular season, a regular regulation game yesterday between Milwaukee and Phoenix. The score was like 130 something to 127 or something like that. Come on, these are like old ABA games.
Yeah.
So yeah, I give Tatum his due. I give the Joker his due. I even give LeBron his due, and all these guys their due. But you know what? If they were playing back in the day when Indiana and the Knicks were playing, 4 quarters, and the final score was 78-75, right? And half the team had to go to the hospital to get stitches, right? Today's NBA, you can't breathe on a brother too hard
Yeah.
without not just a foul. I mean, I'm watching the game the other day, and it was the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I'm watching on the NBA channel, League Pass, and so I'm watching the NBA. I'm watching Cleveland's broadcast team calling the game, and There was a play where the Cleveland guy was going for a layup near the end of the game, and the guy grabbed him, and the announcer called, "Oh, flagrant foul!" I'm like,
Goodness.
flagrant foul? But that's how it is in the NBA now. Man, you breathe on a guy hard, it's a flagrant. Touch him in his head. Not even hit him hard, but like, you glance him with your fingertip.
Yeah.
Low to the head, flagrant one. Come on, man. So I say that to say this. Yes, the offensive display of these guys are great, but Rob, I take it with a grain of salt because in today's NBA, it's all run and gun, bro. It's all run and gun, in my opinion. I don't think anybody plays what I consider to be defense in the NBA these days.
It's hard to argue that because it is true. Because even before, you could look at we'll take LeBron for example. Look at throughout his career, he's always been lauded as a great defender because of the way he defended the ball. He was another guy similar to Tatum who could defend 1 through 5. And yeah, the league has gotten softer. You say who plays defense in the NBA? It's the referees, no doubt about it. They're the best
Right,
defenders in the
right,
league right now. But
right.
I'm not going to argue about the scoring, though. I do love the scoring.
I do too. I do too. But you know what's the other thing though, Rob? I'm gonna tell you. I was watching, like I said, I was watching a little bit of Milwaukee and Phoenix, and to see how both teams were executing down the stretch in a game that was tight and executing plays, executing sets, shot making, both inside and outside. I'm watching that, and as a Knicks fan, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, this is how basketball is supposed to be played. Do you ever get like that, Rob? You're a Knicks fan.
Yeah.
Do you ever get like that sometimes when you're watching some of the better teams in the league compete against one another and you see the execution, you see the shot making, you see the decision making, and you look at that and you say to yourself, yeah, the game actually can be played like this.
Yeah. And you wonder, how come we don't have a player that can do that? How come we don't have a point guard and haven't had a point guard since what? Since John Starks, maybe?
I was
Who
gonna
knows?
say since Walt Frazier.
Yeah.
That's not fair, but, because we got
Yeah.
Mark Jackson, right? You know, but you know what I'm
They've
saying, I'm
had a
just being
few,
funny.
but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but man, sometimes I look at them. They beat the Clippers. I was watching some of that game, but they actually didn't trail in that game. They played a pretty decent game, and I like to see the young guys out there playing now because the Cam Reddish had a great game. Finally, they're giving him minutes. R.J. Barrett seems to be like the focal point of the offense, so it's good to see that as well. But yeah, man, sometimes I think the same thing. Why can't we have that guy? Why can't we run an offense like that? Why can't we win some games?
And why can't we have a so-called superstar who understands that when you're playing on the road against the best team in the league and you get into a little back and forth with the player and both of you get a double technical, that it's not a good idea to push past the referee so that you can get another shot at the guy and push him. How come you
Yeah,
don't realize, man, that you can't do that? And it seems
yeah,
as if after he got tossed from the game, that all he was concerned about was what happened to him because he's just complaining about what the guy did, what the guy did. What I'm thinking to myself, do you not have any kind of game awareness, Julius Randle? That guy is frustrating to watch sometimes, bro.
yeah. And I'm not starting a rumor here, but he looks like a player who knows he may be on his way out come this off season. And I think he's, for the most part, and he's playing hard sometimes. He had a good game not too long ago, but he looks like he knows he's on his way out, and we shall see come this off season. Looks like he's sort of quitting a little bit since they've kind of shifted towards this youth movement and put R.J. Barrett as basically the number one on this team now.
Yeah, I've said that as well. I do think there's a part of him that feels like he was the alpha dog, and now he's been replaced by the young pup, and he's not taking to that too well. But the Knicks are a bona fide mess. So yeah, he may be on the way out. And I don't know what news that is for Knicks fans, whether it's good or bad, but someone else who's on their way out, and I think it's good news, I think, in a sense, and that is Coach K at Duke, Mike Krzyzewski. After 47 years of coaching. Listen, here's the thing. I will tell you this. When I started watching, I've been watching basketball for a long time. And when, started watching, Duke and as they rose to prominence under Coach K, I will tell you this. My first reaction to Coach K, I didn't like him. I didn't
Mm.
like him because I didn't like Duke. I didn't like their players. And Coach K seemed to have that constant smirk on his face that seemed to suggest something that I later found to be not the case, which just tells you the danger of prejudging people. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I'll admit that, but I had prejudged him. Just a phenomenal coach, phenomenal achievement, phenomenal career. And, I think of, from what I've seen anyway, it seems to me just as good, if not better, of a person. And, he's on his way out. This is his last year at coaching, and just a great career, man. And so, congratulations and hats off to Coach K.
Yeah, and listen, the way Duke played was the reason why I even wanted to do, the March Madness brackets and all that stuff. It's because of Duke and the way Coach K led that team and the talent that gravitated towards wanting to be coached by him. And, even when he coached the Olympics, you saw these stars of the NBA join in because it was like, oh, this is Coach K. Like, we get our chance to be coached by Coach K. Like, that's a big deal, even for NBA stars, the LeBrons, the Kobe's, all those guys who were there, the Carmelo Anthony's, Dwayne Wade, all those guys had an opportunity to learn from this man who is college basketball, and hats off to him. Congratulations to him on a great basketball career. Obviously, Hall of Fame career in every aspect of his life. So congratulations to Coach K.
No doubt about it. Hey, listen, man, we're going to get on up out of here now, but a quick 15 seconds on Ben Simmons and his position right now with the Nets. Ben Simmons needs to get on the court, bro. He needs to get on the court. When we were talking about the potential trade, my position was I don't think Ben Simmons is a good fit for the Nets necessarily, and I don't think he's a good fit for New York. He needs to get on the court. And I say that not knowing the full story. I don't know if his mental health issues are holding him back or if they're physical issues holding him back. But this whole thing with him not playing as they're going to Philadelphia, the Nets are going to Philadelphia. And it's like he's definitely not playing that game. Almost makes it seem like he was running from that game to me. I'm concerned, and I just want to see him get on the court. I think he needs to reestablish himself as the player that we believed him to be prior to this whole fiasco with Philadelphia.
Yeah, definitely. He needs to be out there, man. If the Nets, they're in the tough spot right now towards the end of the bottom of the rankings there, of the standings, but they need him, whatever fit he'll bring to the squad. They need him. And, like you said, we don't know his state, his mind state right now, what's going on with him in his head, any of that stuff, but Ben Simmons needs to get out there on the court, man.
Yeah, I just want to see him out there and reestablish himself, but hopefully he can do that. But all right, man. Listen, we're getting out of here now. Rob, I don't know, man. We'll try to see if we can get baseball back on the docket, get that teed up again. But right now, no baseball on the horizon. But hang in there, bro. I think, it has to end soon. I continue to be an optimist. So hang in there and maybe we'll get baseball back soon for you.
I'm trying, man. I may have to hold up picket signs like those guys are doing outside the MLB office. Try to motivate people to get this thing going.
Yeah, we need something, but certainly, man. Look, good talking with you today. We'll catch up again next week. We'll do it all again. We'll keep our eye on all of the breaking stories that are out there, and come back and offer our take on them. But you be good, man, and we'll do this again next time.